Hi, I'm Katie.
And I'm Joe.
And today we're going to talk about how Christianity warps your brain. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Born Again Again podcast. If you like what we're doing on here, you can find us on our Facebook group, our Instagram, or our Patreon, and you can find all those links in the description below. Okay, so today we're talking about how believing in Christianity warps your brain to sort of stop critical thinking, I guess, from the outside world.
Yeah, and this was spurred on by some conversations we've been having recently, because since we recently kind of came out as non-Christian publicly on Facebook and to our families and stuff like that, we've been speaking to our family and to our old Christian friends who had questions for us, and for random Christians that have recorded responses and kind of tried to convert us back. And, you know, we've just been having a lot of conversations with people who believe what we used to believe. And through that, it's felt like we've been looking at a mirror image of ourselves almost.
Mm-hmm. And it's weird because we can see maybe how we used to believe and the kinds of answers that we gave ourselves and really satisfied ourselves. But now just we see how they're very circular, you know, they're very cop-out-y answers. And
cop-out-y.
Yes, it's a word. And through that, we've kind of been like collecting all of the ways in which the like basically believing in the Bible and believing in God and stuff has sort of like warped our brain into staying in the system.
Right. Not being able to think critically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we were taught to disregard critical thinking and questioning when it came to our faith, just because like God was a mystery and it was better to not understand.
Exactly.
You know, it was more virtuous. And that kind of brings us to our first point, and that's that God is a mystery. Yeah, so when you believe that God is a mystery, then he can do anything because you don't need to understand him.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's my belief when I was Christian was that God is so much bigger than us and so much grander than us that he's outside of human reasoning and logic. So like basically what that ends up meaning is that God can do anything he wants and will or do nothing at all. But as a Christian, we'll never really understand what he does or why he does it, and we should just be okay with that. That's what I believed.
I know, and that it's funny because like as a Christian, and when I was a Christian, I could totally see this argument, but now it's sort of like it doesn't hold up, because if you have like a God and he is great and like higher than your understanding, but he's like killing every single person in the world. I know he's not doing that right now, but I mean, like, what if, like, where do you draw the line? When is his like love and his mystery still good?
Right. Yeah.
You know, like there has to be some sort of like boundaries for him in order for him to be like ultimate, like loving presence.
Right. Well, I think there's a difference between like not fully understanding something and it being kind of mysterious and being able to respect it. Like that almost makes you respect it more. But when Christians argue that God is mysterious and so he can basically like do anything he wants, I feel like it's just taking it way too far. It's like he's untouchable. He's off the hook for anything because he's mysterious, and that satisfies Christians, or it satisfied me when I was a Christian.
I know, it satisfied me too. And I feel like that brings us to our next point, and how faith is like the ultimate virtuous thing that you could possess. Mm-hmm. Faith in that God is mysterious, faith in whatever the Bible says, faith. And I think
that's so bizarre.
It's so strange because nowhere else is it great to have faith over like critical thinking skills, facts, knowledge, you know, all of those things.
Right. Yeah. Testing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you told me that and I felt like, whoa, you're right. Because my whole not even childhood, but my childhood and up until a couple of years ago, I, like many other people, I think, would have considered faith to be a virtue. Like someone who you say like, oh, they have a really strong faith. That's a good thing, you know, or I always thought of it as a good thing. And I kind of assumed everyone thought of it as a good thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's like, makes total sense now. Why in the world would faith be a virtue? That's like saying the better you are at believing you have an imaginary friend, the better person you are.
Yeah, faith is only a virtue when you're talking about some kind of religion.
Right.
I think like
some
sometimes,
kind of religion that requires faith.
Yeah. I feel like it can sometimes get, exchanged for hope. Like it's good to have faith or hope that something will happen because like it's good to not be in despair, but like having faith for every single thing in your life. Like I don't understand it, but I'm going to believe it on faith. I don't get that, but I'm going to believe it on faith. I'm not seeing any evidence of this, but I'm believing it on faith. It's just too much. After a while, it kind of breaks your brain, and you stop even caring about any kind of critical evidence for anything.
Well, think about how much faith comes into play in your daily life. Like as a Christian, because like you're taught to pray, even though you never hear back ever, you're taught, but you have to pray every day. Make sure you're faithful with your praying. Okay. You keep doing that. You, have faith that people will be healed, even though you pray for people to be healed and they're not healed.
Yeah. And you personally go out and try to heal like a bunch of people just on the street sitting in wheelchairs or like limping down the sidewalk and nothing happens.
Yeah. And at the time when that happened to me, I just thought, well, I must not have enough faith.
Yes.
Or like we're taught that about Noah's Ark, as little kids, we're taught about Noah's Ark and taught about Jonah and the whale and taught about Adam and Eve and all these like crazy Bible stories from the Old Testament. And at least how I was brought up, and I think how you were brought up too, I was taught that those were all real, literal stories, that Jonah actually exists, that a whale actually swallowed him, that he was actually alive in the whale's belly and like lonely and praying to God,
Yeah.
And like all of the adults in my life believed that, and they taught me that that was true too. So, I had like total faith, even though that's the most ridiculous thing.
I know, but like you don't doubt it because you're brought up as a child believing it based on faith.
Yeah. It's like if your parents would have never have told you that Santa Claus didn't exist.
Yeah, it's the same. It's actually the same. It also teaches you that it's a virtue to be satisfied with not understanding something, and it's actually more beautiful that way if you can't understand, because that means that it shows that God's so cool and he's so mysterious and he's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't understand something, that must mean it's more grandiose and complex.
I remember actually hearing that as a response from Christians as well, that like, if I have a question about God, like, well, why does God let cancer happen? Or why does God let natural disasters happen if you think he's in control of everything? They say like, well, if we could understand everything God did, then he wouldn't be God. Like that, like as if that's an answer to say like, well, that means my God's good and he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, God's mysterious. Another thing that it does is it teaches you to use confirmation bias. So you basically are starting at point B and you're using like everything to confirm your point B instead of starting from point A and then getting to point B.
Yeah.
Like you're not like starting at a point and like asking a question and then like observing every single piece of evidence, whether it proves it right or wrong. You're just starting from the end and you're only looking at the evidence that's proving your case. And I saw myself do this all the time. Like I already knew that Jesus was God. And so you don't see anything that proves that wrong.
Right. Yeah.
You just don't
like
see it.
You like can't see it.
Yeah, if you already started off with at the finish line.
We were just talking about that, how I've always kind of felt like Christian apologetics is that exact thing. It's not like them looking at the world and looking at evidence and saying like, okay, through all of these things, we can see how it's most probable that Jesus lived or that whatever God does exist. They are like stout Christians. Is that a right word to describe a Christian? A person?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever. They're very strong believers in God already. And so in their mind, their mission is to find everything that already confirms what they already believe. Yeah. It's Christian apologetics have always seemed kind of unconvincing to me. Even when I was a Christian, they seem kind of unconvincing.
Yeah. For me too.
Even more so now, of course.
So the last part of having faith is whenever I think of faith, I always think of childlike faith. And that was like a big buzz phrase that was said a lot, like have childlike faith, Jesus wants you to have childlike faith. And I pulled a couple verses about being a child, because I feel like for Joe and I, it was really prominent, like, because we felt like children.
Yeah.
And we felt like children until we got out. And so...
Until, like, recently.
Yeah, until recently.
Felt like a child in certain ways.
So here's from Matthew 18. It says, "He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, 'Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven.'" And then in Matthew 11, "At that time Jesus said, 'I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this is what you were pleased to do.'" So over and over again, it's emphasized to be like a child, to be meek, not to be wise.
Not to, like, trust your own thinking. Yeah. The whole thing is, like, Christianity wants you to be okay with being kind of naive about things, okay with being ignorant about what you believe yourself, because I feel like maybe some people don't feel like this, but when I was a Christian, I felt like I could never, like, truly explain my beliefs to another person in a way that would make sense to them because they didn't have faith. And, and I thought that was because what the Bible said, that that faith will seem like foolishness to the world. And I thought that was why. But in reality, the reason I could never, like, explain my faith in a convincing way to someone else is because it's really confusing and I don't even really understand the logic of it, And yeah, it's weird. It's weird looking back on it now and realizing, that's probably why it seemed hard to convince someone that they should be a Christian.
Yeah, because
it's really, like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, because you're already, like, confused in your head about
subconsciously,
it.
But you're, like, think you're okay with being confused, or, like, that's just a sign of your faith.
It's one thing to, like, believe something, in your heart and yourself, but once you start explaining it to other people, I think you sometimes realize, maybe I didn't think this through.
Right.
But that's not the case with faith. I don't think you ever would say that. Okay, so now that you're in this position, this child lowly position, it's the perfect time to talk about authority. So, the next thing we've noticed was how much emphasis Christianity puts on authority.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you've all noticed this. It's very obvious. So you're a child, you have childlike faith, and now you're taught to respect anybody older than you or who's had a longer spiritual walk than you. And, regardless of whether or not they're smarter than you or, they've had more life experience or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, you just gotta trust them. You have to submit to the authority that God put in place over your life.
Yeah, and I feel like that has real practical, long-reaching applications because beside the fact that the Bible teaches you to respect your father and mother and all of that and be a good, obedient child, Jesus actually, I don't know if it's Jesus, but in the New Testament, it talks about how we need to respect, like, the leaders of our country.
And let me just read something for you right now, Joe, from Romans 13 about that.
Okay.
It says that everyone must submit to governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. So anyone who rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and they will be punished.
Yeah, that's, like, so damning. I feel like that's perfect. That's, like, a perfect example of why so many Christians are kind of seemingly okay about, like, what Trump is doing and how his character is and all of that stuff. And yeah, it's really bizarre. It's kind of like they're just accepting, well, God must know what he's doing. That's why this is happening to us. I feel like all of this stuff, we talk about it every week, but, like, how as a Christian, you aren't taking responsibility for your life because you give so much of, like, the reins, or you believe that God is so much in control of everything that happens that
Jesus,
you should just
take the wheel,
trust whatever. Yeah. You let Jesus take the wheel of the presidency of the United States and then now look where we are.
Yes.
So yeah, it's weird. I respected authority so much. I feel like that was really, really, like, important to me. I was a super obedient kid for the most part. I was, like, really respectful of elders, and maybe that's just something my family taught me, but I think, of course, the Bible supports that and supports Christians respecting their elders.
Well, I think they taught you that because of the Bible.
They taught me that, I think, because of that book, Growing Kids God's Way,
yeah, and that
which
too,
we still need to read.
Which is, I'm sure, biblically based.
Right, yeah. So yeah, I mean that, and respecting elders or people in authority at church, and our home group leaders and our apostles at our church and the people who are prophesying. And yeah, it's just, I feel like you are taught to trust what other people say so much and distrust what you yourself think so much. And it's just a part of like this really oppressive, controlling box that Christianity puts on you.
Mm-hmm. If everyone who is older than you or like has had a longer spiritual walk than you is able to speak into your life and you have to listen to them, you have no space to listen to anyone else.
Yeah,
you know,
including yourself.
To yourself. Yeah. So it's just very oppressive.
I felt that so much.
Yeah.
What you just said. I mean, in the last episode, you were talking about how like an older lady who you didn't know at all, since she was older than you, was like asked you to take a ride with her in the car and give you some advice about marriage. Like, you didn't ask for that, but as a good Christian, you were supposed to just like sit there and listen and be respectful.
Well, I'm younger, so I don't know as much.
Yeah, that's what you thought. That's so weird.
Yeah. For the record, we're not saying that we know everything.
Of course not.
But
I
we
think
know
it's good
ourselves.
to trust yourself.
Yes.
I think that it's sometimes people who are older than you are probably wiser, and sometimes they're not. And it feels good to be able to choose for ourselves.
So our next big thing we noticed is how the Bible has so much authority over our life.
Yeah, that's like the ultimate authority for Christians.
Even before God.
Right. Well, okay. That's actually an interesting point, and something I brought up with one of my Christian friends a while back. And I felt like when I brought this question up, he couldn't get it. It was like that Westworld thing we were talking about, where when I asked it, he was like, well, I don't know. That doesn't look like anything to me. Mm-hmm. So my question to him was, don't you feel like if the only way the only information we have about God or Jesus,
and the only
like
thing
that,
you're trusting,
the only thing you're trusting, or the first thing you're trusting before God is the Bible, like the literal book, the paper book. So to me, it's not a belief in God, it's a belief in the Bible first. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that in a Christian life holds the ultimate authority, above our ideas of who God is, or even our personal experiences.
You can't trust our experiences. You can't trust our personal emotions about God.
Right.
So you have to trust the Bible.
Yeah.
That's what you worship.
Yeah, that's what it is.
So our whole lives we're told that the Bible is inerrant and it's the perfect word of God.
And we believed that it was like literally breathed by God, and everything in it actually happened, and it was, perfect, inerrant. We thought it was different than every other book on earth.
Mm-hmm. And this is why I have two verses. In 2 Timothy 3:16, it says, all scriptures breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness. And then in 2 Peter 1, it says, knowing this, first of all, that no prophecy of scripture comes from someone's own interpretation. For no prophecy was ever produced by the will of man, but men spoke from God as they were carried along by the Holy Spirit. So when we were looking up these verses too, we were thinking, why does anyone then not take the whole Bible literally?
Right. Yeah.
Based on these two verses.
Yeah, we read those two verses today and we were like, oh yeah, that's why we were fundamentalists.
Yeah, that's why.
Because like it says it right here. Yeah, I'm sure there's different ways to interpret those verses, whatever.
I'm sure there's a different way to interpret every verse,
Yeah.
Joe. Okay, so I remember the first time I ever realized how weird it was that the Bible told us that it was inerrant and good.
Like that's where we learned that the Bible was inerrant, from the Bible.
Yes.
It's like a person coming up to you on the street and being like, hi, my name's Jack. I never lie. I always tell the truth, and I will never tell you to do something that's going to harm you. And then you're like,
okay.
Well, Jack actually told me that he's a really good guy. So, yeah, he's a really good guy. I believe him.
Yeah. Did you see that Jack's like murdering people over there?
Yeah.
Oh, he's told me though
That's
he
okay.
never lies and he's really good.
It's also really weird to me that with such a huge emphasis on the Bible, like I said, even before God, I feel like the Bible is the highest point of someone's faith. For me, I felt like all of my thoughts were constantly being subconsciously filtered through what I knew about the Bible. Like any thought I had to make sure it aligned with what the Bible said. Or if I was, like worshiping and I thought maybe God was speaking to me, I had to make sure that aligned with what the Bible said. Mm-hmm. If it did, then God said it. And if it didn't, then it was the devil or something else. But yeah, so like the TV shows I had to watch, I wanted them to kind of line up with the Bible, like the music we listened to, everything that went through my head, I wanted it to filter through my own Bible filter. And so it's just like so constricting, you know, like imagine how constricting that is. I can barely remember it now, but just thinking about that and like reading through my journal and stuff and looking at our wedding vows and realizing how conformed my mind was to the Bible is scary. It makes it really clear.
Like so big. You think the Bible is like about the whole world and the whole universe, but you don't realize until I think, I don't know, after stepping back, how small it is, how confined you are if you're doing that.
Right.
If you're filtering through just one book.
Yeah. Just one book.
So that leads to how words and concepts are distorted. And that's in the Bible, that's where that starts to happen. And so you start to not be able to use words the same way that other people are using them.
Like everyone else.
Yeah. So God to you automatically equals good. So anytime somebody mentions God, it is inconceivable for you to see God doing anything that is other than good, because God equals good already to you. The world is automatically equal to evil. So anytime anyone talks about the world or like shares some news about the world or like you just looking for confirmation bias that proves that the world is evil, the world is evil.
Yeah.
We realize that love in the Bible equals love plus judgment, and it equals conditional love and justice.
Yeah.
Because that's how I learned to love,
right.
You know, based on, rules. Like you do what I say and then I love you because that's how God is, you know?
Isn't that weird? Like we've experienced that firsthand talking to my mom and stuff. And I was trying to say to her, like, Mom, don't you see how God's not loving? Like, if I were to ever say, Mom, I don't respect you, would you ever want to like throw me into a pit of fire? Like, no, of course not, because you're loving. That, you know, can you see by extension how God is not loving? But you know, as a Christian, your belief is God is love. You know, the love is like made by God. God is a definition of love, whatever.
So whatever he does is therefore loving.
Right.
And if we go back to the top argument, God is a mystery. So there's your other, like, I don't know, hurdle that you need to get over.
Even when it doesn't make sense, it still makes sense because God's just mysterious. That's why it doesn't make sense.
You can see how it really like breaks down your critical thinking abilities.
Yeah, right.
Another thing, like I was going to say that concepts are even distorted, such as, the blood of Christ. Like, think about the phrase for a second. The blood of Christ, it's seen as cleansing, beautiful. It saves you from your sin. But if we were talking about the blood of anyone else, or if we drink blood from anyone else, it would be seen as some creepy cult.
So insane.
Like, there's so many references, like, or movies where people are, like, part of, like, a scary cult they're doing for Satan, and they're drinking blood. But Christianity does that as well. And I understand that it's more symbolic. But, like, as Lutherans and Catholics, they believe that somehow the blood in the body is like magically and mysteriously transformed into the wafer and the wine.
Right.
Yeah.
I know.
So
that's
anyway,
so crazy.
That's a concept I think that that Christianity has normalized, which should not be normal.
Yeah. And then on top of that, Jesus's sacrifice is like human sacrifice. Isn't that so weird? Yeah, Christianity is based on human sacrifice, and well, even me saying that now, it's almost hard to see it as weird. I think I'm still like so programmed.
No, I was going to say the same thing. It's so funny how normalized human sacrifice drinking blood is, just because the
human sacrifice and drinking blood.
The majority of our population has grown up with it. Even if they don't believe it anymore, they think like it's okay to be religious. Like that's just part of religion and stuff. But like,
it's like the words that are coming out of my mouth are insane, and I know they're insane, but like they still don't seem weird. That most of my life was spent like living around this ideology based on a human sacrifice. So bizarre. Yes,
so bizarre. Okay, next one, we've talked about it a little bit, but it's that Christianity teaches you not to trust yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably...
That's the biggest one for me.
Probably like it overarches. I don't know. It's strange. All of them kind of like umbrella each other.
Yeah.
You can use, if one argument doesn't work, you can use another one of these, like you could go down the line. If a non-Christian had a question, you could go down the line of all of these. Don't trust yourself. Well, God is a mystery. Well, what does it say in the Bible?
Yeah.
There's always more and more and more.
And each of those things we've talked about have each had their own lasting consequences into our life, even as non-Christians.
Mm-hmm. But especially this one.
Yeah.
So, don't trust yourself. I think we've already mentioned the verse. This was my confirmation verse, and it was Proverbs 3:5-6. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart." I'm doing this by memory. "And lean not on your own understanding." That's a humble brag. "In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight."
I like the annotations.
I was staring directly into Joe's eyes.
I know. I felt uncomfortable.
As I was saying it.
I didn't know what to think.
That was my confirmation verse. Lean not on your own understanding. And I never realized what it was saying.
Yeah.
I thought that it was very comforting, because I think mainly because of the part where it said that he will make your paths straight. I think maybe that was something I was more focused on.
That verse kind of explains in one sentence, like the last couple sections, where you're not to trust yourself. Mm-hmm. It says that directly. You're only to trust the Bible. It's basically saying, like, don't believe your own understanding. Like, you need to lean on God. Mm-hmm. You need to just trust what God says. Yeah.
And I mean, if you're in Christianity, there is a lot of like love, and they talk about how God loves you and Jesus loves you, but like just sit in church and you'll learn that you are sinful. You are broken. Yeah, you don't have any good in you, no. And any good you have, it comes from God.
Everything bad you do that, mm-hmm. or the devil does it. Yeah.
And if you have a thought, and it aligns with the Bible, like you said before, it's from God. And if it doesn't align with the Bible, it's from Satan. Yeah. So you're like terrified to think on your own. So like it just stops your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I've said it before about the whole idea of I must decrease and he must increase, meaning I must decrease and God must increase in my life. That was like my mantra as a Christian. And so I think when you're in Christianity, maybe this is a helpful mindset to have. Like, if you have that mindset, you're going to be a really good Christian because you're going to be so devoted. And that's what I did. And I was a good Christian. Mm-hmm. But once you leave, I feel like there are lingering effects to that where it was hard for me to trust myself and hard for me to trust my own understanding of things and hard for me to think for myself. Mm-hmm. And it's still like a continual practice to like actually do that all the time, mm-hmm. Practice thinking for myself, practice having my own opinions. Sounds weird, but I know. This is so deeply ingrained to me from my time as a Christian that it's like I need to like do work to get it out. It's crazy.
Yeah, and like it's because you've stifled your own inner voice for so long that it now you can't decipher where it is and like what it is and what it's saying. You know?
Absolutely. It's crazy that was your confirmation verse.
I know.
Something you probably liked and was like, "Oh, that's a nice verse." Now it's also telling. It's like that verse like sums up Christianity for me.
I bet some adult found it for me though. And just gave it to me.
That's true.
Here's a good one. Yeah. I'm like, sounds good. All right.
So then in addition to not trusting yourself, I feel like by extension, you especially don't trust the world. Yeah. And the Bible's really explicit about that.
Yeah, the world is evil. It equals evil. And it's funny because I've heard other ex-Christians say this and we've said this. Like, you get out of Christianity, you go into the world, and you're like, hey, they lied to us. The world's not that bad.
The world's actually kind of cool. Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who are doing good.
Yeah.
And who have really good life philosophies.
Right.
But hold on right there, because there's a verse about how Jesus made it seem like Christianity was foolishness so that the wise couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
And let me find it for you because I love it.
This was one of the first things that my mom brought up too.
It was?
I feel like, like just the whole idea that we like got by the world. They're so scared of the world, scared of cities and scared of liberals taking over. It's just weird. There was really no trust of the world. And even us, we had such like a leaning towards thinking the world was so evil.
Then again, it goes back to that question, why is the devil so strong?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you trust God enough to say that he can protect us from the world?
Right.
It just shows a lack of faith.
But like,
Get your faith on track.
I love how the Bible has like the perfect excuse for why we shouldn't trust the world and why the world doesn't believe in Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, the intelligence of the intelligent, I will frustrate. Where is the wise person? Where is the teacher of the law? Where is the philosopher of this age? Has God not made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. And I'm skipping down. It says, brothers and sisters, think of what you were before you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are.
It's like basically,
that one
it seems
is
so insulting,
that is
doesn't it?
I wrote that down. When I wrote that down, I wrote, this is the most insulting verse.
Yeah.
Because he's bashing Christians.
Who wrote that?
Why'd you ask me that question? Paul.
He's like basically saying like, you guys were all like pretty dumb. You're all kind of poor, right? And that's how you know, like, God chose you guys. We chose you because you've never seen anything good.
I remember coming back to this verse and thinking like, this is how they kept the serfs in control. They gave them something to make them feel special because that they were poor and they were dumb.
Well, and then the Bible says that you should stay dumb and you should stay poor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It not to get like too political, but like when we read the Bible in this way, we did see that it looked like such a control tactic,
right,
you know, for the people, the leaders of the time,
yeah,
to keep people feeling like they were chosen, but to tell them to stay poor, to stay unintelligent.
Right. Don't question.
Not to question authority.
Right. Crazy.
All right. You know, it's funny. I think were we talking about this before and we kind of said, can you imagine Trump saying this?
Oh yeah.
To his followers.
Yeah, and I feel like he would say it.
Yeah, like you guys, like you're just hardworking Americans.
I
like,
bet you haven't seen a whole lot of money these days, have you? Everyone's like, no.
Like all the rich people, like all the liberals, like all the free thinkers, they think they're so smart, but you guys are just like hardworking Americans, just down like from the earth, you know, like basically like insulting them.
You guys are the chosen ones, and together we're gonna make America great again.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not funny, but it does seem like a scary parallel.
Yeah.
All right, so the last one, and I think one of the most obvious ones, because I think that even some Christians see this, is how much Christianity appeals to your emotions. Mm-hmm. I know that your aunt even didn't like music and Christian music for a while. She didn't want to go to a church that had any upbeat music because she felt that the devil was in the music.
Right.
Is that true?
Well, I don't know. Maybe she thought it was this exactly, that she didn't want people to be emotionally manipulated, which if that's the case, then that's really smart.
That's cool.
It's like, that makes sense, because as we were talking about, the church service is so emotionally, like captivating, you know, it brings you up and down. You get in and you sing some happy songs and you're praising and your adrenaline's up and your heart rate's up, and then you go into a somber song and then it brings you down. And
then it brings out the offering plate. Yeah.
Right. And all of these things kind of manipulate you emotionally, that prime you, put you in a certain state so that you're more open and more accepting of what the pastor is about to say to you in his sermon. Mm-hmm.
And this is something that we didn't realize. I think this was actually one of my first questions, though. Like, what, are we being emotionally manipulated?
Right.
And that's kind of like what led us here.
Yeah.
But not even just in like a Pentecostal church, in a regular non-denominational church, they have this mood that they bring and they play with. Most
churches I've been to, of course. My church had like huge speakers, and we had huge lights and like 25-foot tall curtains that they'd project these different colored lights that would change during the song. And huge screens with graphics and videos on them and stuff.
And everyone's like, how's everybody doing today?
Yeah.
Are you ready to worship the Lord?
How you guys all doing on this Sunday morning?
And everyone's so happy and in such a good mood.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like a crazy show. It's a concert, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like super compelling, really emotionally charged, for sure.
And I think that's fine. But I think it's fine if you understand that that's what's happening.
Yeah, right.
It's fine to go
really
to
a good
church
point.
and like, you know, but just be conscious of it, that that's happening,
Yeah.
you know, like, cause that stuff happens at a concert. Like
Right.
you said, it's like a show.
Like maybe, yeah, it's fine to feel great and all upbeat, but maybe you should like be a little bit questioning of the conclusions you come to while you're in that state.
Yeah,
you know?
like maybe you don't actually need to be saved again. Maybe
Right.
it's just an emotional
Right.
like manipulation that you're feeling.
Yeah.
So another appeal to emotion is obviously hell. And that was the one, you know, it's funny like how emotions got us out and then emotions kept us in, because the last thing that kept us in was the fear of hell.
That
And-
was the hardest thing to let go of.
Yes, because it's super emotional. Like, you're taught your whole life that this place exists, that's going to torture you if you stop believing in Jesus. And so you can think critically up until a certain point, but then your fear kind of hits you. You're like, well, I can't let go of this yet because I'm too afraid.
Right.
And you came up with a really cool analogy just when we were talking about this.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember it?
Yeah, it's kind of like if you're like hanging off the edge of a cliff, you're holding onto somebody's hand, and they're holding onto you and you're hanging over the edge of a cliff. You're not going to be able to like criticize that person.
No.
You need them so badly.
Yeah.
So like, of course, there's nothing you're going to like, you're not going to question them. You're not going to like doubt them. You're going to just put all of your faith in them because you need them to save you.
Yeah.
Until you realize that, oh my God, this cliff doesn't exist.
And then you just step down onto the ground.
And then you step onto the ground and you're like, wait a minute, I don't need you at all. But it's not until that point, you know, you could never see that person with like a clear mind until you weren't absolutely dependent on them. And we experienced that same thing, that like we were never able to see these criticisms of Christianity, or never able to see these ways that we were being manipulated by Christianity, while we thought that we were completely dependent on it for our eternal salvation. It wasn't until we started to walk away and until we started to decouple from it a little bit, that we were able to see all these things so much more clearly.
And it was a weird realization when we first started seeing the patterns and seeing why we believed what we believed, and how all of our critical thinking skills in this area were sort of stopped. They were stopped in so many places.
Yeah.
There was like a guard up. I felt as though this was the perfect system to keep believers in a perpetual cycle of like maybe doubt, but then like fear like keeps them in to come back to the altar and try to be saved
Oh my
again.
gosh,
And
yeah.
I realized, I saw it, and it was really scary to me. Like how long I guess we were trapped in the cycle
Right.
of it, but without knowing and feeling great.
You're right. Actually,
You know?
yeah. It's hard to leave, you know, and I think
Yeah.
I feel so fortunate that we were able to get out of it. And I feel so fortunate hearing your guys' stories when you send us your messages and stuff. It just feels like we got lucky in a way. You
I know. It kind of feels like sometimes we got the best gift of all
Right. We got born again.
without wanting to sound arrogant there.
I'll let myself sound a little arrogant because I was really scared of sounding arrogant for my whole life.
That's true. We should be arrogant just a little bit.
Just a little, yeah. Can overcompensate a little bit. So yeah, through all of these, I felt like each one, while they had an effect in Christianity, they've had lasting effects outside of Christianity as well. And so, you know, with God being a mystery, I feel like we had to unlearn, our feeling that it's okay to not understand things.
And just
you know.
because you don't understand something does not mean it's God.
Yeah. And then faith, like we had to unlearn the idea that faith was a virtue and started to have to learn that, wait a minute, faith is like a terrible thing. Why would I believe something that I have no evidence for?
Yeah, and evidence is more virtuous than knowledge,
right?
or
Yeah,
like
intellect and study, and
experience and testing. Yeah,
right. And then teaching us that we should only trust authority. That's something we had to unlearn. I feel like we've had to learn to stand up for ourselves, and we had to learn to set boundaries with people who are older than us or who are in authority over us, which is really difficult. We had to learn that we can't just trust one book. We need to like spread our knowledge out and get our source of information from multiple places. And along with that, we needed to learn to trust ourselves. That's like the biggest thing. And we've talked about that a lot. But yeah, we've been like constantly trying to relearn how to trust ourselves, how to trust our own opinions, how to trust our thoughts and trust our feelings. And all of it has been such a learning process. And these things are hard to let go of,
But it's funny because when we did switch to this side, it did seem that the evidence of trusting in these things or like changing our view, was working out.
Right. Yeah.
When we trusted ourselves, it did lead us in the right direction.
Right. The secular way.
When
works.
we stopped looking at one book, we did realize we could learn more and realize the world was beautiful. Yeah. So if you guys have ever experienced any of these brain warping things, let us know, and let us know if you've experienced any different ones. We'd love to hear about them. So thank you so much for listening to this episode, and we'll catch you next week. Thank you all so much for coming along on this journey with us. All of your messages and support means so much. If you'd like to connect with us or support our podcast, there are a few different ways you can do that. First, you can find us on Instagram at born.again.again. You can also join our private group on Facebook.
Or you can check out our website, bornagainagain.co, where we have all of these episodes, our blog with some posts that we've written, as well as a big list of books, movies, documentaries, and articles that have been helpful in our deconversion. And finally, if you'd like to support us financially, you can do that through our Patreon.
Again, thank you so much.